Yes, thank you for staying with us. It's Journalist Hangout on Sunday. Now, the economic situation in Nigeria reminds one of the saying by the French that the more things change, the more they remain the same. Despite efforts and assurances, the economy is yet to pick. Now, the governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Yemi Cardoso, said the rising inflation and exchange rates will reduce drastically in 2024. Cardoso, who was also projected less revenue from oil exports next year, declared the total trade from the Nigerian Foreign Exchange Market stood at 18.804 billion naira in the third quarter of 2023. He explained to members of the National Assembly Joint Committee on Banking, Insurance and Other Financial Institutions that the outlook of the economy for 2024 remains very positive as the inflation and exchange rates will stabilize. So 2024, we can't wait to come. Julie? Yeah. Well, Cardoso seems to be optimistic, but we Nigerians will say till we see it. Yeah, till we see it. Because when you are talking about the inflation rate, when you are talking about the exchange rates, you know, it's nothing to write home about. Some people that they are not meant to be in the country right now, they can't go because of foreign exchange, so I have to sit put.
Yeah, but I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that the exchange rate pressures will go down. One, the refineries, once they start working, it is projected that we will stop importing refined crude from 2024. The NNPCL CEO already made that clear. And it makes sense to believe him because the Warri and Port Harcourt refineries, their rehabilitation is proceeding at a good pace. And if we can get these two modern refineries working, then, and we have Dangote refinery as well, with an installed capacity of 650,000 barrels a day. We don't need to import. And the biggest pressure on foreign exchange in our country is this importation of petrol. If we can stop importing petrol, then, because that is the biggest guzzler of our foreign exchange earnings, then it means that the foreign exchange that we earn will be able to use this to stabilize the foreign exchange market. The CBN will be able to supply the market a lot more. That is one reason I'm confident that the problem of dollar illiquidity that we have will go down, especially if we don't have to set aside so much of it to import petrol. So we will definitely benefit from having a lot more dollars to supply the foreign exchange market, because this thing is a function of demand and supply. If the CBN was in the past making available about 3 billion, or let's even say roughly 2 billion on a monthly basis, this time around they are struggling to even make $200,000 available to the market. There is no way that the pressure will not be huge, since look at the supply gap from between $1.5 billion to $2 billion. Now we are doing like 200,000. We are supplying the foreign exchange market with just 200,000, a month. There is no way that we won't have the problems that we have now. And the buffers that we had in the past that we could use to even defend the currency, we no longer have it. We now know that we were lied to that we actually had $33 billion in reserve. We don't have that kind of money. They didn't tell us that they had exposure to JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs. They didn't tell us that they were owing them money. And you had to pay them. So we are also these airlines that we are owing airlines money. We are owing. We are beginning to pay back to the banks. If we are able to clear some of this indebtedness, we'll be able to free some dollars for the market. So, for the foreign exchange market. So I believe that that pressure will go down. And when that pressure goes down, I also believe that it will partly also affect prices of goods and services. Because a lot of what our people buy are imported, and it's even worsening food inflation. So I expect that things will improve, especially I am more confident on the foreign exchange side than the inflationary trend. I'm not so confident that the inflationary trend will go down drastically. Maybe a little bit, because we have this problem in our country. Once prices go up, it's difficult to bring them down. But we will experience an improvement in the supply of the foreign exchange markets.
CBN, do you share the same optimism with Mr. Yemi Cardoso?
Well, to an extent, you already said it earlier on that let's wait and see. You know, Nigeria will say, make we wait and see. So let's wait and see. He must have his indices. But it's not looking too good for me, because if you look at our inflation rate, we are galloping towards 28% already. That is very, very high compared to even some of our neighbors. And Jide spoke about the issue of refineries. We were told and promised that by the end of December this year, the Port Harcourt refinery will start functioning. Today is the 17th. We have barely 14 days. Yes, so we have 14 days. I don't know the magic that we can be able to
happen even on the 30th. Let's give them.
That's what I said.
31st.
Well, let me give them
the last day.
Yes, even if it's the last day. But what I'm saying is that we're already counting down already. We have barely 13 or 14 days to go. So the Port Harcourt has to come into function, or else we still continue with what we're doing, which is importation. Dangote, we have been told, yes, is going to function, but don't forget that PMS is not going to form part of that, because our major importation is PMS, is the petroleum that we use. Forget of diesel, blah, 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 but petroleum is key. The only way we can be able to get out of it is, one, exporting more, looking at other areas of engaging more, anymore. We're talking about the areas of agriculture, mines, and crude. And also, most importantly as well, AY, believing that we can also look at putting some political, some kind of political will within what is happening within the South now. It is very key. We have to look at that. People don't understand that what is happening in Rivers State now, if allowed to continue,
we'll get to that.
I know we'll get there, but what I'm saying is still part of what we're saying. So, it is a whole holistic, but let us believe and hope, believing that some of the indices that the central bank governor is saying will be able to work, and we'll be able to start recovering from the economic thing that we find ourselves so far.
All right, joining us from our Abuja studio for more discussions on this issue is an economist and CEO of Derry Hills Limited. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Kelvin Emmanuel.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for having me this Sunday afternoon.
So tell us about, do you share part of the optimism of the CBN governor that this next year things will get better?
Especially on the foreign exchange side, as well as the inflationary trend.
I'll tell you that Yemi Cardoso promised that inflation is going to come down. I expect actually that from the second quarter of 2024, inflation is going to peak, and
it's going to stop this sharp month-on-month increase. If you look at the inflation data that was just released, you see that Kogi had the highest food inflation rate at about 41.2%, followed by Kwara, followed by Lagos, followed by Rivers, and then followed by Lagos. And then Borno and Bauchi had the lowest inflation rate, somewhere around 26.2%. And what is interesting for me when I look at these states is that Kogi is Nigeria's #1 confluence state. Kogi, for example, has a landmass of 29,000 square kilometers, and it connects about 14 states in Nigeria. And Kwara, for example, has a landmass of about 36,000 square kilometers. And then you look at Rivers State, more riverine, it has a landmass of 11,000 square kilometers. I can understand food inflation for Lagos because Lagos has a landmass of 30,577 square kilometers. But I can't understand food inflation in Kogi, in Kwara, and in mostly River State. And then you look at the headline inflation. The national average, for example, for food inflation is gone up from 31.3%, it's gone up to 32.8%. You look at headline inflation. The headline inflation, I think Kogi still has the highest. Kogi is at 33% for headline inflation, and Borno is at the lowest for 22% for headline inflation. National average has gone up to 28.2% from 27.3% month on month. And you know what's interesting is because I listened to you earlier, you were speaking about the airlines and the increase in prices of tickets, and you know how that also contributes in a small measure to the basket for calculating inflation. Listen, there are two issues you have to focus on when you're talking about increase in the prices of airline tickets. You have to consider the fact that Jet A1 prices have gone above 1,000 naira per litre. You also have to consider the cost of C-check maintenance for the airlines, and these things are in foreign exchange. But on the other hand, there's also what they call antitrust law that the government uses to check market allocation, bid rigging, price fixing, monopoly, and oligopolies. So there are instances in other parts of the world where companies come together, they decide to set the price, and then they rig the markets. For example, I'll tell you categorically, and this is something I've said over time, severally, that the FCCPC is not empowered to actually go, in terms of the law that backs it, to actually go against companies to fight these 5 things I mentioned: market allocation, bid rigging, price fixing, monopolies, and oligopolies. You see it in several sectors in Nigeria, in aviation, in manufacturing. There are several use cases that case studies that the regulators, if they are listening to me, can pay attention to see. Now, on the issue of inflation, it's not exclusively in the control of the governor of the central bank, even if money supply is at 36%, and the governor is dealing very well with money supply, which is causing a little scarcity and shortage of cash across the banking sector currently in Nigeria, because he's using open money market operations instrument to mop up liquidity in the system. Okay? There is also the other path of the supply side economics, which is fueled by the fact that the supply chain of Nigeria is exposed to the FX rates, and there's illiquidity in the foreign exchange markets. We have net negative foreign reserves, and the CBN still has outstanding for the forwards that it has to pay to the banks on 4 items: on commercial letters of credit, on dividend and capital remittances, and on Form A. So going into 2024, there is one major area that is going to be a game changer in terms of ensuring that inflation peaks, and that is energy. Because when you look at your energy basket, you see that 9 different items, from PMS, Jet A1, automotive gasoline oil, base oil, to LPG, to bitumen binders, to petroleum coke, to refinery gases, they control about $85 million in demand on a daily basis. Nigeria spends $85 million daily on these items. That cumulatively comes to about $2.4 billion on a monthly basis.
So if NNPC, for example, can deal with the fact that it signed a contract with Dangote, it owns 20% of the refinery, it's obligated to provide 300,000 barrels of crude oil per day in feedstock for a period of time, and supply Dangote with the light crude that it needs to refine, which is struggling to do, because even with the 6 million barrels that was projected to be delivered to its refinery, for which they've only delivered one, Shell has delivered 1 million barrels, yeah? NNPC is still not able to make good on its promise to deliver 4 million barrels of Dangote between December 2023 and January 2024. If you can deal with that and have the commercial refiners in Nigeria actually do backward integration through import substitution to ensure that you stop importing energy, you will see the cataclysmic impact on the economy. Because in terms of the cost of transport, which is a major part of food inflation, yes, you'll see that diesel prices will come down, price of plane tickets will come down. I also heard you mention that, PMS is not doing, PMS is actually going to come up by February or March for Dangote, because when you start the commercial refinery for the first time, you have to test what they call the catalytic reformer that actually cracks naphtha into petrol and premium motor spirit. So you have to do with the lower and the middle distillate before you go to the upper distillates that does PMS and Jet A1. Okay, so going into 2024 and concerning the projection of the governor of the central bank, I'll tell you he's in control of one side of that promise. He's not in control of the supply side of the of the curve, because that has to deal with the fiscal side of the economy.
No, I want you to be definitive in terms of what you think. Do you think that 2024, the problem of dollar illiquidity that we have will ease considerably when we stop importing petrol, PMS? Do you think it will ease considerably? And if that happens, will the foreign exchange market not benefit significantly?
It will benefit significantly. And this is because, when you were mentioning earlier that in 2014, Nigeria was delivering $30 billion to the CBN to supply to the markets. And DSDP came, and that number came to almost zero. And the FX market became illiquid. And you had all the issues you had with Ways and Means and private and public sector CRR, and how that affected the debts and exposed the foreign exchange markets. And you saw the ensuing devaluation and depreciation. If you stop spending $2.4 billion monthly importing energy products, those 9 items I mentioned that forms your energy basket, definitely you see the impact on your FX rates. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you that in 2024, I expect that with lower demand on the FX markets in Nigeria, that we're going to see the rates begin to ease back to the real effective exchange rate level between 800 and 850 naira per US dollar. I don't expect, personally, and this is my opinion, I don't expect that the exchange rate is going to stay at these highs in 2024. But you have to stop putting so much pressure on the markets that will reduce the tendency for players in the I&E window to move liquidity from the official exchange rate market to the parallel exchange rate market. Because empirical evidence has shown that anytime there is a 1% deviation between the official market rate and the parallel market rate, there's a 0.4% migration of liquidity from the official market to the parallel market, because players want to get the most value for their US dollar liquidity.
So, you are cautiously optimistic. Is that the way to describe it?
I'm cautiously optimistic, but I think the government needs to do take bold steps. And I'll tell you why I said they need to take bold steps. President Tinubu, has always brought out this, before he became president, this ideology of fiscal federalism. I want him to practice it by actually ensuring that as a president that he is today, that he can review the exclusive, concurrent, and residual legislative list, that he can review the principles of derivation, and change the format that we've always had, where you have so much power vested in the middle, and where the states are not empowered to think and fend for themselves. Yesterday, I think it was on Friday, all the accountant generals of the states were in Abuja. They had a meeting into the night. They finished at about 9 p.m. And at the end of the day, 1.08 trillion naira was declared across the federating units. You can't continue with a system like that, okay? President Tinubu also has to realize that he has 87 trillion naira in debt to deal with. This year, he has to pay 8.1 trillion naira as debt servicing and financing costs, which is 94.8% of his capital expenditure, which leaves him about 5.2% to do any capital expenditure. So for him to change that, he needs to work with his fiscal authorities to reduce leakages, raise revenue, both from petroleum product tax, PPT, and from conventional taxes, right? He needs to raise non-tax revenue from anywhere between 10.5% to around 15%, and then up to 18% by the third or fourth year of him being in power. If he can work on the fiscal strategy paper in that medium-term expenditure framework, okay, to move gradually and reduce the fiscal deficit in the budget from the current 48% down to around 25 or 20%, you'll see that there'll be less pressure on the FX markets. And the reason is very simple. When you have so much debt and you have to rely on deficit financing through ways and means and through external borrowing, it affects your exchange rate, because the market is always trying to correct the inflation to interest yield curve. Yes? And you see that as inflation goes up, the interest the government pays on its debts go up, right? So for me, I believe that it's going to be a long road towards improvement. But in order for the president to see appreciable and significant progress, he needs to take bold actions. He needs to take the bull by the horn and actually implement on the bold reforms that he's always believed in, even before he became president of Nigeria.
I want to thank you, Mr. Kevin Emmanuel. Thank you for your intervention. He's the CEO of Diary Hills Limited. Thank you for that intervention. Jide, Sikia, I'm not happy.
Let's be optimistic.
Let's be optimistic.
Let's be optimistic.
All right. More plaudits are coming for President Bola Ahmed Tinubu over the resolution of the Ondo State political impasse. This time, the All Progressive Congress, APC, in Canada has commended President Tinubu for his intervention in the crisis. The Vice President of the APC in Canada, Abiola Oshodi, described the intervention as a wealth of wisdom that nailed what would have caused a serious political crisis in the States. Jide, what do you make of this?
Remember that we urged the president on this program to step in. It was because we were sure that if he stepped in,
his intervention
would normalize. And that is what we have seen. There was absolutely no reason for all that transpired.